Will there be a recession in the fall of 2025? I think not, but I am increasingly worried and raising my risk assessment. I'm Dr. Bill Connerly. I connect the dots between the economy and business. It's late July 2025, and I am thinking about a recession. So let me begin by setting the stage for what has changed in our economy, and then what is the no recession scenario, and then I'll talk about the possibility of a recession and what you as a business leader can do about it. The United States economy went into 2025 in good shape. We had solid growth in 2024. The Federal Reserve started cutting interest rates, but then in early 25, the Fed said, hey, employment is fine. Inflation is still above target, so we'll pause the interest rate cuts. Most of this presentation is going to be about tariffs and tariff uncertainty. Two separate issues. But let me mention a couple of the other small things that I think are not recessionary. The United States has stepped up its immigration enforcement. There is much slower growth of the labor force of low skilled, and that's affecting agriculture, construction, and to a lesser extent, restaurants and hotels. That is not enough to put the economy in recession. It will slow the growth, but just a little bit. The other issue that has gotten a great deal of news since the one big beautiful bill has been passed was the Medicaid cuts. Let me emphasize that those are cuts from projections. So the budget people start with projections, which were pretty steep. Medicaid spending has been going up a good bit. And with the one big beautiful bill, that projection is much lower. But the current expectation is that over the next 10 years, Medicaid spending will still go up at about the pace of population growth plus inflation. So that is not going to be recessionary. Now let's talk about what tariffs mean. I'm going to begin with a working assumption that we get the tariff issue settled by the end of summer 2025. So would that be recessionary? I'm assuming something on the order of 30% tariffs. And for perspective, 30% is what I'm assuming. The old number was 3% tariffs. So we go from 3 to 30. That's a big increase. But I've done the math. I used a sophisticated data analysis device. Now I know what you're thinking. This is a Chinese development. It's certainly Chinese technology, but this is a Japanese implementation of the technology, so there's nothing to worry about. What I see as the effect of 30% tariffs on the U.S. economy is less purchasing power by consumers, and that will mean a small drop in discretionary spending. But I opened this by saying I was increasingly worried. Now let's talk about the different issue of tariff uncertainty. We are hearing anecdotes of companies deferring capital spending decisions, companies with unfilled positions, and they're leaving them unfilled instead of hiring because they don't know how the tariffs will play out. And some consumers whose jobs are dependent on an industry that could be subject to tariffs, those consumers are cutting back on their discretionary spending. But so far, all we have are anecdotes. I've looked at the data on business capital spending, employment, and consumer spending, and I do not see a change that I can attribute to the tariff uncertainty. So if we get things settled by the end of summer, no recession. But if this continues, the give and the take, the back and the forth, maybe we'll do a huge tariff here, maybe we won't, then I think the anecdotes accumulate and become real data. And I forecast under that assumption a mild recession over the period of prolonged tariff uncertainty. What are the odds? I am guessing that it's 60% no recession, 40% recession. But, I've looked at my crystal ball. I've looked carefully. It says nothing about what President Trump is going to do. So You may have a better sense than I have of what the president will do. If you want to change from my 60-40 odds to your own odds, go right ahead. If we do have a recession induced by tariff uncertainty, it will be mild. Most parts of the American economy are not subject to tariffs or the retaliatory tariffs, so most of the economy can go on as normal, but there will be sectors that have to cut back. That recession would be mild. And let me give you a rough order of magnitude. The usual recession, put it at my chin. This is the usual recession. You went through 2008, 2009, twice as bad as usual. A tariff-induced recession would be half as bad as usual. So not nearly as bad as 2008, but it would be a recession with effects on corporate profits and overall employment across the economy. So what do you do if you want to make plans in this uncertain environment? I recommend you begin with a base case. What happens to your business if the economy continues with the same growth rate we've seen for the last year or two, inflation about the same? For your recession contingency plan, one thing you can do is look at your data from 2008, 2009, look at the percentage drop in your sales. And I think this recession will be about 1/4 as bad as 2008, 2009. So if, for instance, you had a 16% drop in sales in that recession, forecast a 4% drop. So it'd be a drop, but not nearly so bad. And project out what you would have to do to maintain your ability to pay your employees, pay your suppliers, pay off loans, whatever. Developing your contingency plan ahead of time, long before it's time to pull the trigger, has two advantages. First, you'll be able to act more quickly, and secondly, you can develop a plan that is consistent with your long-run goals and your company culture. Now let me put all of this in a broader perspective. Because the recession possibility is fairly mild, for most businesses, their critical issues are not economic, certainly under the base case and even in the recession, unless you're particularly sensitive to recession. Most of your business can go along as it had been. So the key to success in the second half of 2025 and into 2026 is more likely to be how well you serve customers and how well you control costs. That is your destiny, and friends, your destiny is in your own hands. I'm Dr. Bill Connerly, connecting the dots between the economy and business.